It's Monday Night Sports Talk on the airnetwork.net. Welcome in, everybody. Busy weekend in the NCAA Basketball Championship. Pirates getting set for their home opener, and the Penguins skating towards a playoff bid. That and much, much more coming up tonight. Greg Banks live in the studio, live from Altoona, Pennsylvania via Skype tonight. We've got Dave Shannon. Dave, how you doing these days?
All right. How about yourself?
Doing well. Got a little bit of rain, and I saw where you went to do some fishing in Erie last week. Any success with that?
Yeah. Always a good day to be out. It was 2 weeks ago. I was up there for 3 days.
Yeah.
And did quite well over those 3 days. And then made a couple of single-day trips Monday of last week, and then again Friday night into Saturday. So,
wow.
Good fishing. A little bit cold. The 3 days I spent 2 weeks ago, weather was really nice.
Yeah.
And then these last two trips were pretty darn chilly.
I imagine if you were up there maybe tonight, I bet you the wind is wreaking havoc, I imagine, off of that lake. I don't know how the weather pattern is there compared to central PA, though.
Well, the one thing that happens, one of the beauties, people will build homes along the lakeshore because in the summer, if there's any kind of a breeze at all, you don't have to run any kind of air conditioning.
Oh, I don't imagine.
Because it blows across the lake. It's the same thing that makes snow
right.
that we all see, but it's also the same thing that just makes that wonderfully calm and beautiful up there, too.
Nice and breezy in the summertime, and, of course, wickedly cold in the winter. Lake Erie. Oh, yeah.
Yes, indeedy.
Monday Night Sports Talk. Greg Banks in the studio. Dave Shannon live in Altoona. And, of course, Dave, the big trending story is the NCAA basketball tournament. We're into the semifinals now after Oklahoma defeated Oregon 80-68. Villanova, by the way, big surprise, defeating Kansas 64-59. North Carolina over Notre Dame 87-74, and Syracuse.
I was impressed that Notre Dame got that far, Greg.
I am too. I am much surprised, but not as much as I'm surprised about Syracuse defeating Virginia 68-62. When in fact, Syracuse wasn't really even expected to be in the run this year. Because many of us even talked at the beginning, like, what was Syracuse doing in the tournament, let alone winning it? Especially after Boeheim had been, suspended for, 8 or 9 games, I guess, at the beginning of the season due to the investigation. Not sure how that whole thing worked out because he decided to knock off last year as opposed to going to the playoffs this year or the tournament. But having said that, Dave, as we set up the semis now with Oklahoma, Villanova, going at it Saturday, and also North Carolina versus Syracuse. How do you see that Oklahoma-Villanova game going? Because Jay Wright has those Wildcats playing some great defense for Villanova. And, of course, you got Buddy Held, who is playing for Oklahoma, and he's just shooting their eyes out all over the country.
Yeah, I'm actually looking for Villanova to, build on what they did over the weekend and actually defeat Oklahoma coming up here on Saturday. That one is at 6:09 right now. The Wildcats are 2-point underdogs.
Really? Okay.
And I think North Carolina will take care of Syracuse, and that'll leave you with North Carolina Villanova for the championship.
Yeah, do you think actually Villanova will be able to even shut down Buddy Hield at all? Because this guy is really the Steph Curry of college basketball this year. He just seems to put them up, and, man, they just go in.
Yeah, obviously a big talent will be playing in the big NBA at some point, and certainly the world lays at his feet. However, that doesn't necessarily set a team up to be totally undefeatable, and I think the Wildcats have a little bit of juju going for them.
Yeah, I think the momentum was on their side for sure now.
Yep.
Yeah, one interesting thing I wanted to note was Buddy Hield actually could have stayed out and went into the NBA in the first round last year, and he decided to go back and play for the Sooners. And what an experience that must be. I mean, his stock in trade obviously went up. He probably was going to get paid last year anyhow. But it's good to see, these seniors that are starting to stay in school for 4 years and then move on. So I don't know, as opposed to that Kentucky thing, for years where it was always one and done. Let me ask you this. Mike Krzyzewski, after their loss to Oregon in that game, he, at the end of the game, waning moments, probably about 9-10 10 seconds on the clock. Oregon was obviously handily defeating Duke. And a guy just out of nowhere arbitrarily put up a shot, and it went in, a three-pointer. So as they were greeting each other in the line, Krzyzewski held this kid's hand, and obviously we could hear the audio where he was reprimanding the young man, saying, "You're a better man than that. There was no need for you to put that shot up." To which the kid, I got to give the kid credit, he said, "Coach, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. My bad." And then they walked and greeted the other players. Is it the job of another coach to correct a young man like that? And how well did he handle that, the young man? Because, anybody would get in my face after winning a game. I mean, even though Coach K has a lot of respect, you think that's something that he should have done? I think he just apologized today.
Yeah, I don't think that's an area you want to get into as a head coach.
Right.
I really, and I think, everybody has a tripping point, and when you're down, when the game's over, and you see something like that happen, and sometimes you do this knee-jerk reflex reaction. I used a swear word in relation to a football game, indoor football game I was calling a year ago.
Yeah.
And, I used a phrase that was, not arable, but it just struck me that way because I watched a team that was defeating the Erie Explosion by, I think, 30 points or more.
Yeah.
Pull a stunt at the end of the game where they actually started using timeouts and trying to set things up so they could score another touchdown.
Yeah.
So the margin of victory would be in the 40s.
Yeah.
And it was like, I called it, well, we're not on the radio, so I'll let everybody know what I said.
Yeah, it was the internet. Right. Go ahead.
I referred to what that coach did as classless bullshit.
Bullshit, yeah. Okay.
And that's, to me, that's what it was. I mean, I understand that you go out to play the game, and one of the things that most any coach will tell you is you want your team to play at its best the whole way through, because when you get to that point where it's like you're out there and you're kind of holding back and you're not playing the way you normally play.
Right.
This is when injuries can occur.
Okay.
And so you want to keep your team, on the up and up and doing exactly what they did the whole game, because you don't want anybody to get hurt. I fully understand that. But when you get to the point where you start calling timeouts and all of that kind of stuff, that, to me, that's a coaching decision.
Yeah.
Believe me, those players would have been just as, happy to go ahead, take a knee, let the clock run.
Yeah, okay.
But no, the head coach decided he was going to use timeouts and end up scoring a touchdown, which was not necessary. And I don't know what, to me, that's just, when you got somebody down like that, and you're not going to be setting a record for scoring in a game in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. Why do you go to that length? So that's why I called it classless BS. Yeah. Now, as far as Mike goes, I think that's, it's a knee-jerk reflex reaction.
Yeah.
And I think he really does probably feel sorry about it, because he's preaching to his team all the time to keep yourself in check. Don't fly off the handle. Keep those things inside. And he ended up doing something himself that he always encourages his players to not do. So,
intuitively, though, he is a coach, and he has coached like Olympic stars and professional stars. My problem with Coach K the other day doing that was he, in fact, has a player on his team who has this habit of tripping other players as they're playing the game. I don't know if you've seen the highlights of this young man. He's a dynamic player, and I can't recall his name. I want to say it's Allison or Allen. But anyhow, he's gotten caught, I don't know how many times this season, just with this inadvertent trip, like away from the play. Mm-hmm. And so if anybody needs to be talked to, I would hope, even after that game with Oregon the other night where he tripped somebody, his coach, I would have hoped, talked to him as well. And I just feel like maybe it wasn't his place. But again, hey, Duke doesn't lose very often, and especially a close game like that. I agree,
that's not his place to do that. And if he is going to say something, it should be to the coach to say, you guys played a hell of a game and you beat us fair and square, but I think you need to have a talk with that young man out there and let him know that something like that at the end of the game is
not necessary.
Really, not the kind of thing you want to do.
Exactly. Okay, so you're taking, let me hear again your prediction for the final coming up next Monday night between, these guys.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Villanova and North Carolina.
Okay.
And I unfortunately think the Tar Heels will win that.
Yeah.
It's like any team that works their way up through the brackets somewhat unexpectedly from time to time. Although Villanova, was a 2 seed.
Yeah, they were 2 seed, and so is Oklahoma 2 seed. The only 1 seed remaining is North Carolina. Syracuse, by the way, was a 10 seed. That's why it's a shocker to me that they were still in, like even the Elite 8, or even the Final 16 teams.
I'll tell you, I thought the Sweet 16 games were so disappointing to me.
They were, compared to what.
Yeah, I mean, and it was like it almost turned me off. Actually, it did turn me off. I didn't really pay attention to the Elite 8 activity because those Sweet 16 games were so horrible.
Was that because, Dave, there were so many upsets like beginning in the first couple of rounds? Because, I mean, let's face it, Northern Iowa came out of nowhere. Michigan State got beat, and which they got shocked. My brackets were all blown to hell the first day. I mean, serious. Yeah. There were teams that I had never even heard of all of a sudden emerging and, of course, just knocking off people left and right. And I think we were left down once we got into the 16 teams or in that round. I wasn't really interested in watching all the games myself, at that point.
Yeah, so. I kept going around, and I think Thursday night there was a Penguins game on.
Right.
So I'm going back and forth between the Penguins and the basketball games that are going on. And I got to a point where it's like, I'm not even going to look at the basketball games anymore because they stink.
But you know
really
what?
Bad.
And we'll talk about the Penguins and their run recently since Thursday. But, I mean, those games truly were probably more exciting, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. Meanwhile, let me ask you this. I probably would go with the Oklahoma Sooners taking on, the Tar Heels coming up on Monday night. And in that, I will take the Tar Heels as winning it all. So having said that, I got no money in this thing. Like I said, I blew my brackets. Matter of fact, on the play-in games, there was a couple of games there, and I think Wichita State, there was a team that just won that first game on a Tuesday night. I was done. But anyhow, having said that, meanwhile, Dave, here's something else. The NITs are going on at the same time. They're sort of like that redheaded stepchild, although the college women's championship is underway too. And it's sort of like, the NCAA, I don't know, maybe because we think about the big dance and the guys, but meanwhile, UConn is making this unbelievable run for the 4th season in a row where they're now 35-0. The Lady Huskies played Mississippi the other night afternoon. It was actually embarrassing. I think the final score in that was like 60 points. At halftime, they were leading, by the way, like by 40 points.
And currently, they're taking on Texas as we speak.
Are they?
And they're leading them 15-6 with 4:23 left in the first quarter.
Yeah, and see, I don't know. What's your thought on the women's game? Because there was a tweet that was made over the weekend that apparently pissed off Gino Ariema, the coach of Connecticut. The guy basically said, hey, listen, nobody wants to watch that stuff. Your feeling on the women's game? Is it just maybe 2 or 3 teams that we have to watch every year that just plain out dominate like UConn does?
Well, I want to attribute this to Robin Roberts, and I'm not a big fan of Robin Roberts because I think her ego gets in the way from time to time. I certainly felt for her when she let everyone know she had cancer.
Oh, yeah, I did too, yeah.
And from that standpoint, but I know when she was prior to that on ESPN, she was just so stinking cocky in the way she presented herself. But one night I'm watching the NCAA women's selection show with the rest of the St. Francis University women's team.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And we're sitting there and we're watching it. And Robin Roberts lets loose with a statement that I thought was one of the most salient points about women's basketball in the U.S. And she said, look, every year we go into this, she said, there's the top 2 or 3 teams in the country,
right?
And then there's everybody else.
Yeah.
That's all there is in women's basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I tend to agree with her. I see that in the games that I've watched. And remember, for how many years Pat Summitt in Tennessee dominated women's basketball.
And Tennessee's still in the hunt to this day, but not to the dynamic, of course, proportions that Pat Summitt had it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
and you had Baylor. You know, Baylor had their little run here.
Oh, yeah, because you had the tall girl in that. So I guess it's cyclical at best, but there again, you know, like you said, there's probably 3 dominant teams, and then there's everyone else. You know,
and you can throw them all into a barrel and mix them up, and you come out with pretty much the same team. And if they play the top team,
right?
If it's UConn that year, UConn's probably going to beat them by 30 points, or 40 points, depending on the team.
And, you know, Notre Dame was there for a couple of years. I remember Mary Four, who was from the Hollidaysburg area, was on that team. And we remember years ago with UConn and Rebecca Lobo, and I think there was that, remember the girl from Hollidaysburg that was on that team as well?
Yes, I forget her name.
It wasn't Jessica Noble. It was, I can't recall her name. But listen, it's a matter of recruiting, don't you think, Dave? I mean, that's what it is.
Well, and it's another thing, Greg. It's a matter of the talent that's available.
Right.
I did go out and watch some high school basketball playoffs. I didn't watch the state championships because I don't get that channel.
Okay.
But I was watching some of the games here in town.
Right.
And the one thing and this has been true for me as long as I've been watching basketball over the years, even at high school, you'll have one player on a 5-player, the 5 starters.
Yeah.
One out of the 5 starters has a chance to go somewhere at a decent school.
Right.
And but that may mean a lower level Division I team, and so I think the amount of available talent does not match the amount of available scholarships and programs and rosters in the country.
Yeah.
It's just like baseball. I thought baseball got watered down the last time they did expansion.
Okay.
And that's why a lot of people started to talk about contraction in Major League Baseball, and that's just never going to happen. It'd be nice if it did, but it's not going to.
Yeah.
And you only have people take certain things for granted. There are only a select few people that can play whatever sport it is at that level.
At that level, right.
And eventually you exhaust the available amount. And when you got a program like UConn, like in the day Tennessee, that those girls that are that good, that's where they want to go play.
Yeah.
So the rich keep getting richer when it comes to that particular aspect of it.
Well, you remember the days of Allie Williams coming out of, what was it, Bishop Guilfoyle, I believe it was. Then she went to St. Francis. They kind of surrounded, girls wanted to go to school so they could play with Allie Williams. And so now you have a little bit of a talent bank because you have that anchor, sort of the same case as the girl that played for Baylor for years and won the championship while she was there. Yeah, Griner. So, I mean, I agree with you. It's the talent pool. You don't have the depth that you would with the men. I don't know how the AAU runs their league for women. I just know it's pretty deep when it comes to college basketball. And so there's a plethora of people that you can select. And these coaches, quite frankly, they're on the road all summer long watching these kids in these playgrounds that they hear about, watching these kids in AAU, which to me is almost like professional ball anyhow, because these kids are not getting paid, but you know what? They're getting all kinds of clothing and sneakers and just all kinds of incentives.
And another thing I can tell you, Greg, when you go out and you see a high school girl that has been playing AAU ball, I mean, it is so noticeable.
Yeah.
Because their movement on the floor is completely different than what the other players on the floor. They're so fluent and smooth in the way that they bring the ball up the court. And the way they move, the way they shoot, a lot of times it seems somewhat mechanical.
Yeah.
When you're watching, especially on the girls' side, you'll see a lot of mechanical movement. You see it on the guys' side too. I'm not slamming girls' basketball in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. But it's so noticeable when you see a young woman who has been out there with AAU basketball,
exactly.
getting the good competitive experience that makes you that way.
Well, it's sort of like wrestling. Our kids now wrestle all year round, and they're going to these camps like Young Guns and over in State College area, Black Dog, and they're wrestling nationally. So maybe 4 or 5 guys from a team will do that all summer, so you can see who the wrestlers are. And that's why I guess Huntington did so well this year and placed, at least 5, 6 guys at the States this year because of the fact, those guys are wrestling all year round. So you're right, it's a different kind of competition, the AAU, and the recruitment of these girls. So I just wanted to make mention of that with UConn, who, by the way, you mentioned is taking on, I believe, Texas tonight?
Texas,
okay, fantastic. Hey, Dave, let me ask you this now. Situations occurred where Jamie Dixon finally hung it up after 13 years as a head coach. He had been the assistant under Ben Howland.
Development in that Texas-UConn game.
What's going on there?
It is now 21-17 UConn. Texas has made a little run here.
We got a game then. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I hope they keep it close.
yeah. We'll see if they can do this for 3 more quarters.
Exactly.
As the first quarter wears down here.
Yeah, but this situation in Pitt, and now I kind of feel like, Jamie was getting them at least to the tournament, but, he just couldn't get them deep into the big dance. He had the opportunity to go back to his home school, TCU, and take that job. There were a lot of rumors going on over the weekend because this all happened rather quickly within a couple of days. Then maybe Sean Miller from Arizona would come home, which I don't think anybody would. That wouldn't even be a lateral move. So why would he leave Arizona, which gets deep into the tournament? Or maybe his brother who coaches, I believe it's Archie, that coaches at Dayton. None of those guys wanted the job. So they pick up this guy named Kevin Stalling, by the way, from Vanderbilt as the head coach. Where do you see the future of Pitt basketball now? Because I don't know. Nobody really knows who this guy is. He didn't have a very secure or stable record. I don't remember Vanderbilt. Well, they got to the big dance at least, maybe the first round a couple of times. Yeah. But, I think so. Pitt's going to be hurting here for a few years. Matter of fact, you know what happened? There was a kid named Jeter from Pittsburgh who played for this guy at Vanderbilt. He wanted to transfer to Pitt a couple years ago.
Right.
And the coach wouldn't allow him. But now the kid's at Pitt, so how's that going to look now?
Yeah, that's an interesting quandary that they're going to have to solve. Here's the thing about coaches that you've not heard of before. And by the way, Texas appears to have gotten within 2 at the end of the first quarter with a big 3-point shot, but they haven't put it up on the board yet. I don't know. Yeah. The clock may have gone out. But anyway, I digress. Let me get focused here on what we're talking about.
Talking about Kevin Stallings being introduced as the 15th head coach at Pitt now.
Yeah, and what you end up with there, with any coach, Greg, it's a 4-year process, and really not till the 5th year do you know what that coach really is.
Okay.
Because for the most part, unless this thing between Jeter and him from before was a major problem, he's probably going to stay there and go ahead and finish out with the University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I would think he would not transfer again. So bottom line is you're going to have that going on. If these kids like the situation that they're in Pitt, they're going to stay there and finish it out. And then in the 5th year is when you start to see, okay, these are the fruits of this guy's recruiting labors and coaching efforts and everything, because every coach has a different way to coach the team. Off the floor, practices are done differently, coach to coach.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of an adjustment period there. This is what will sometimes lead to transfer. They don't, they maybe preferred the way the other coach did it.
Yeah.
This new coach doesn't do it the same way, so they may leave. So there may be some defections out of the program. But in the end, you're not going to know what he's really capable of doing for 5 years.
Yeah, so you got to give him some time to develop his own program, and plus get some of his own recruits in. I mean, because Jamie Dixon, Jamie's going to be faced with the same situation at TCU. Now, the thing with that and TCU, I don't recall them going any deeper than Pitt has gone, although, Jamie probably was tired and probably needed to move on. They have a new AD in the last couple of years at Pitt, and he's made some really wild ideas when it comes to selecting coaches. But having said that, Kevin Stallings, and here's a good connection, Dave, his son Josh plays for the Altoona Curve. So the guy's sort of like now, he's going to have this local flavor or local connection. He's probably going to be able to recruit rather well because he was down in the South. He may have to do that New York thing, which Jamie did well. Jamie had that connection in New York. But I looked at this guy's record here, and it says he takes over a team that went 21-12 overall and 9-9 in the ACC a year ago. Of course, the Panthers reached the NCAA tournament for the 13th time in 15 seasons. They lost to Wisconsin 47-43 in that opening round game.
Oh, God, was that a horrible game?
That was a horrible game. Yes,
we
it
were
was.
talking about high school girls basketball. That's what it was like.
That score killed me, and I got to believe in Vegas they were probably dying by like the droves, because I'm like, that's like a girls basketball game there, man. You know?
That was really sad. But that all being said, Jamie did what he did with Stallings. For whatever reason they decided to choose him, if they're being true to being a program that's really concerned about the athletes, they're going to let this sit for a number of years, and then in the fifth year, let's see what happens. And at that point, if you see that this is not developed into something that looks like a real good competitive ball team, then you can get rid of him. And that's where I am with Pat Chambers at Penn State. Now.
Well, he's close, isn't he? At this point, he's got about 4 or 5 years, and I would imagine by now.
Exactly, and he's not shown that he's been able to recruit young basketball players that are capable of taking Penn State to the next level.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I thought that would be a problem to begin with, simply because I didn't know who he was at first. I thought, though, when you're in that Boston-New York corridor, you have the potential. You certainly know the good schools to recruit from and what have you.
No doubt,
But it never really seemed to play out for Penn State. In my opinion, it's time for him to go.
Right. Monday Night Sports Talk on the airnetwork.net. We've got Dave Shannon live in Altoona tonight. Greg Banks in the studio. We'd love you to join us. Give us a call, 814-242-4845. Again, that's 814-242-4845. Or you can contact us on Skype. Just go to Greg Banks 3. That's Greg Banks 3 and make a request. Dave, you mentioned Penn State. Let me ask you this. Christian Hackenberg, the quarterback. That last game that they had in the bowl game, you could see, obviously, he had a problem with James Franklin. Let me ask you this. The guy's been making his rounds. They had the pro day up at Penn State last week, and he made a comment that got out over the air, and, of course, in press, that the reason why he had such a terrible sophomore and junior year was because of James Franklin. It was like he threw his coach under the bus, and they obviously don't have a good relationship. Now, having said that, as you're being interviewed by the NFL, do you think they're going to take that into consideration to remember that O'Brien was his coach initially, who is a quarterback coach, basically, and that Franklin acquired this guy, okay? So what's the damage control that has to happen in the NFL? And obviously Christian needs to keep his mouth shut, right?
Well, yeah, that's the big thing, because what you're looking at is character of the player.
Yeah.
And I think there isn't a coach alive that won't tell you that being able to own a problem, to be able to take ownership of something that went wrong, and just say, I had a bad couple of years, and, we were restructuring. We went through tough times when Coach Paterno died, and blah, 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 and not point the finger at anybody. That's at least taking somewhat ownership of what the issue is. It's not pointing the finger at, Now, this can depend, too, on the organization that may be looking at you. You know, some teams are a little more tolerant of that kind of behavior as opposed to others. Now, I don't think, that the Steelers are the type of team that'd be interested in somebody like that. There's not a lot of finger pointing that goes on with the Steeler football team. However, maybe he fits it at a team like New England, where that kind of thing really doesn't seem to matter to them.
And he can ride the bench for a few years because Brady's still going to be in control there. I was just going to ask you, how high do you see this guy going in the draft? I wasn't impressed his sophomore or junior year. Of course, he's coming out, going into the draft now. He obviously couldn't acclimate to the system that Franklin had as opposed to what O'Brien had. But having said that...
really have, and this is another thing, just real quick, Greg.
Yeah.
Why he would pick on his coaches beyond me, because picking specifically on the coach is absurd, right, because his offensive line was what was letting him down most of the time.
Right.
You know, so why do you point at Coach Franklin about that? Mm-hmm. He's operating first as, he's operating with a smaller number of scholarships.
Yeah.
So it's not like he could go out and recruit some guys for the offensive line. Mm-hmm. The line got depleted because of the goings-on at Penn State.
Right.
And so why would you point that? That's not Coach Franklin's problem.
Exactly. Yeah. He actually acquired that problem, as did O'Brien. And having said that, now the recruits and the scholarships are all cleared up. And now these are Franklin's recruits coming in. And he's going to have a full card, dance card, if you will, when it comes to the recruiting. But Hackenberg, I'll see how that thing works out for him, because I felt kind of squeamish when I heard the comment as well. It's like, dude, you just threw your coach under the bus. And most people, well, like you said, New England might deal with that only because he's going to be riding the pine for a while. And maybe can learn.
New England, maybe an Oakland Raiders might be willing to put up with that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Some of the other teams that you can think of that have, that kind of attitude, maybe even a Carolina Panthers might be willing to put up with that.
Well,
because there was finger pointing going on down there.
Yeah.
And it's just like that is not becoming, it is a team game.
Yeah.
So, the more you own up to that, the better off you are. And when you start to point fingers, and then it's like you as a head coach, even at the NFL level, you don't want your quarterback saying, "Hey, that goof doesn't know what he's doing." Well, hey, buddy, I don't need you. There's a lot of other guys that are quarterbacks.
Yeah, it reminds me of the guy in Chicago. He always has something to say, the quarterback there, but he still remains because he has what they call potential. And I've not seen it in 6 years yet, but it may happen someday, anyhow.
At some point.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, let me ask you this real quick on a couple of subjects in the NFL. RG3 now moving to Cleveland. Was that a good or bad move? Because, I don't know physically how the guy's doing, but his coach, new head coach Hugh Jackson, who took that job, says RG3 is a tremendous talent whose just freakish arm display during a private workout prompted Jackson to tell the team executives that it felt like the earth moved beneath my feet. Now, we know there was probably an earthquake in Cleveland that day, to be for real, because, the only thing moving in Cleveland is like the crap in those rivers out there. So how do you see RG3 fitting in with something that has nothing to do really with the real NFL as we know it?
Well, here's the thing. He couldn't stay at Washington any longer because whatever bloom was on the rose when RG3 was doing well is well gone.
Exactly.
There's no way to restore the shine.
Yeah.
And that's a good move to get out of there. Mm-hmm. Cleveland obviously is a place that's in really, has been in need of a quarterback now for an extended period of time. And if he is healthy, it's a type of situation where he could end up in a really good, it could pay out well for him, where he'll get to, show off his wares and also be able to make a decent buck or two. And it may make Cleveland at times was awfully competitive this past season in spite of themselves.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And if RG3 is actually back to, a condition that's similar to what he was when he first came in, then, he can make Cleveland into a competitive team. Not good for the Steelers. It's not like that AFC North isn't competitive enough.
Right.
But now if you add Cleveland in as a competitor, it's like all four teams. It's like everybody's a problem.
Well, let me ask you this. The Colts now have Andrew Luck, who looked like he was hurting last season, and he awaits his second contract ever in his career, which means now he gets paid real money. He'll be getting a raise here this year with the Colts. They're talking about maybe $16.2 million per season, which will be a 5-year contract now, keeping that in mind. Do you think they're rolling the dice here, or maybe they should just kind of like extend the current? Well, I don't understand if they can extend his current contract, but you think they're in a pretty good position and Luck will get healthy and bring the Colts back to prominence? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I like Oliver Luck. I think he's
And Andrew Luck, Oliver's his dad
already.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good move. I would give him an extended contract because there is no reason that I can see to give up on him at this point.
Right.
I think he's the guy that's going to take you into the future and is not going to let you down at any particular point. And he's not necessarily been shown to be, as the phrase goes, injury prone.
Right.
So, he had an injury this year and it affected it affected the play. But in the end, he's not, he's not shown that that's something that's going to happen all the time. So I would, if I were the Colts, I'd hang on to him. He seems to be very popular, both nationally. I mean, he did a lot of commercials over the course of the year. And also in Indianapolis, and that's where it matters.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, well, something else. Thelma called me. You remember Thelma? She called in with her Super Bowl prediction from Florida. She called last week, and she said, hurry up, turn on the television. I said, why? She goes, Antonio Brown's on, Dancing with the Stars. And I was like, oh, okay. So I tuned in there, and not only was Antonio there, but a bunch of his buds from the NFL were sitting out in the audience. And actually, the dancing competition is, remember Hines Ward won this thing years ago, remember?
Yeah, right.
It looks like the competition is between he and, I'm trying to think of the linebacker that plays for Denver. Oh, man, Von Miller.
Okay.
He's on the show, too. So in case you get a chance, man, make sure you watch Dancing with the Stars because Thelma said, I don't know. So I don't watch those shows, because, I mean, hell, they had all kinds of people on there. I think the Kardashian and kids have been on there. The chick that was with the, what was her name? She was with the Food Network, and she made mention of some kind of racial remark.
Paula Deen.
Yeah, she was on there one time, and she lost in the first round. So I don't put a lot of credence in those shows. But, hey, if anybody can dance, I'm sure Antonio can. He was humping that goalpost that time pretty cool.
Hey.
Well, I don't mean it, but it was dancing. He was doing a dance. That's called the bump, Dave. Or the nene or something. I don't know what it is. Hey, listen. Okay, it's Monday Night Sports Talk. Greg Banks in the studio. Dave Shannon, of course. And, we're on the internet, Dave. We can be a little, dicey from time to time.
Risque
or double entendres. But let me ask you this. Pittsburgh Pirates about set to open up their season. I think they have I think they're coming up north on maybe Saturday to play the Reds somewhere. I don't know if that's a scrimmage, but it looks to me like they actually open up their season on Sunday against the Cardinals at home. Yep. Now, I'm looking at this lineup just to be sure. As I'm looking at this thing, I'm seeing I'm seeing some new faces, especially at first base. Help me out here. Is it Jaso? Yeah, Jaso. What's the likelihood that he is going to be a solid first baseman? Because the rest of the infield looks pretty solid to me.
Well, I think there was a plan there for a while, and then Michael Morse got injured. They wanted to do left-hand, right-hand platoon depending on the starter.
Right.
And Jaso would get the start against lefties, and Morse would get the start against righties. And that kind of got shot by the wayside. I'm not exactly sure. I do know that something did happen to Michael Morse, so that kind of throws a screw into the works there.
Right.
I would love to see Josh Bell turn a corner and be able to come up out of the minors and actually contribute for the Pirates. But so far, he's not exactly at a point where he lights them up. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
They're going to keep him down on the farm, from what I understand, until later this season. And he, along with, I'm trying to think of the other guy that they sent back down as well. And that's okay because, again, they'll get a little bit of extra play. But here's something that kind of boggled my mind. McCutcheon's been hitting a lot of homers, man, in these spring training games. And I know they're not the same as, it is live action. But the first thing I thought was, oh, my God, I hope he's not taking anything. Because he does look bigger to me. But then again, that's me. And, I might just be skeptical now because when people start slamming the ball, just like in knocking the cover off of it, I get a little suspect, and probably I shouldn't. But here's one of the things I just heard today. The Orioles might have interest in outfielder and Pirates minor leaguer Matt Joyce. Now, that's what I'm hearing, that Joyce has a possibility of going to the Orioles, and the Orioles are looking at trading up. I don't know. Does that affect us that much, since he's really just a minor leaguer who has been called up from time to time? And they're only paying a guy like $100,000 a year or something like that?
Well, it depends on where they felt Joyce was going to fit in, because believe me, the way things are at any particular time is not what the player personnel development people have thought about for the future.
Okay.
Everyone that's down in the minors, they see a path for them in the future.
Right.
For some of them, it is that they want to see them in the major leagues at some point. Mm-hmm. And for others, it's just, okay, that's somebody for the rest of the guys to play with.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way affiliated minor league baseball works that way. It's like at most, if you go to an Altoona Curve game, or in the case of the Pirates, the Indianapolis Indians, or, wherever it is you go, there are at most 3 players that are on that team that they're expecting, that player personnel are expecting to get to the major leagues and contribute. Yeah. And that's amazing because, you're talking about 25-man rosters. Mm-hmm. So that means you're paying 22 guys just for the sake of being there.
Well,
so those 3 guys have somebody to play with.
Yeah.
So if Joyce is not that big a part of the plans for the future, then it's fine. There are people. Austin Meadows is somebody I hear talked about a lot.
Okay.
And if had an opportunity to play here in the spring, or at least not that I've seen in any of the games, and I really haven't read up on that.
And I'm not seeing his name anywhere on the roster here for the moment, so I'm not really sure what his situation is. But in regards to Joyce, I'm reading a report out of SB Nation that says the Pirates signed Joyce. It looked at least somewhat likely he'd make the 4th outfielder. Since then, he's hit a good power in spring training, although he's only had 7 hits at 35 at-bats. Now, as they note, the Bucks don't really need a traditional 4th outfielder because you got McCutchen, Marte, Polanco nearly every day, and then they've got Sean Rodriguez. They can stick him out there. Josh Harrison, which they won't put him out there. You mentioned Michael Morse, trying to fill in wherever necessary.
And Morse actually had played some outfield so far this spring.
So that's probably the reason why, while Joyce is a left-handed outfielder, maybe they just feel like, you know what, we can kind of give up on him, and we can guarantee that at least he'll get this little bonus change, and Baltimore can deal with him. So we'll see what we get in that trade, but we'll follow that up throughout the next coming weeks as the Buccos get set to take on the Cardinals. Do you see the Cardinals being a strength in the conference again, Dave? I see where Matt Adams is healthy. They had him on TV the other night, and he's hammering them out already in spring training for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I don't think I think what you're going to see is a changing of the guard. Chicago. I do think the Cubs are, probably the cream of the crop in the Central.
Yeah.
And what that means is it's going to be between the Pirates and the Cardinals as to whether, and I don't know that it's going to work out that, the other 2 teams are going to come out of the Central this year either, because I think you're going to see a better performance in the National League East with Mets and the I'm saying the Caps,
Yeah.
That's the hockey team, dummy, the Nationals.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the other wild card entry may come out of the East this year.
Although, hold that thought, by the way, on the Mets. I just got a report in that Harvey has some kind of injury he may be dealing with, and they're not really sure the guy is going to be ready to go in the next 6 to 8 weeks now. So their chances, of course, they've got some other great pitchers, the Mets do, but now it depends again on what the Nationals do, so it'll be interesting. You think the Pirates can do better than a wild card this year, Dave? Or you think they're pretty much stuck in that rut? Just because of this strength?
They're stuck in that rut because they're not willing to take that final step, which for them, their final step right now is how many pitchers do you want to pick up a name pitcher that has a record,
right?
And a record of success that you can bring in and be a part of your starting rotation, and they're not willing to cough up that kind of money to bring in a pitcher. And until they decide whoever it is that has the purse strings, until they make that decision, they are not going to be at the top. It just won't happen.
It's not going to happen. You and I discussed it, I believe, with Chad a couple of weeks ago when we were on Monday Night Sports Talk, talking about Liriano getting the start for the Buccos when they take on the Cards on Sunday. And, of course, down in the, number 2 position this year will be, now the name
Garrett Cole.
Garrett Cole. Yeah. Garrett Cole actually has a better ERA than Liriano. But you think it's just a matter of you start this lefty first and then you get into the meat of your rotation, or does the rotation change?
Cole wasn't ready and hasn't been able to participate in spring at the full level that you normally would.
Okay.
So I at some point, if no other time during the season, when you get to the All-Star break, then you make that switch.
Right.
Coming out of the All-Star break, then Cole is back as your number one starter, followed by Liriano, and then hopefully John Neese, and hopefully something happens to Jeff Locke in an airport and he gets left behind.
And I don't know if you saw where Pirates traded O'Flaherty to the Braves. I think that happened today. And I don't even know if that's even significant because I didn't even know who O'Flaherty was.
Yeah, I did see him. I did see him play in a game, one of the spring games here.
Yeah.
Nothing outstanding. It was okay.
Yeah.
He was out there and he pitched and he was fine.
Hey, how is Jung though, man? How's he doing? Because I don't hear his name being bandied as much. Is he in pretty good shape? Health-wise?
Last report that I saw about Jung Ho Gung is that he was running. They showed him running the bases. They had video of it.
Okay.
But he's not touching the bags.
Oh, okay.
What he's doing is running down the line. He turns a shorter corner at first and goes to second, and he never touches the bags because they're still a little concerned about his, the impact of actually hitting the bag while you're running.
Yeah.
And they say that, it's probably going to be, you'll see him in May at some point is when he's expected to be back. But, hey, great deal. Freeze yesterday, hits the Saturday hits the home run.
Yeah.
The one run that they had against Tampa Bay on Saturday. So, it's, they got somebody there that can, I hope that doesn't create a problem. Some people would say, well, that's a good problem to have. But, I'd hate to see them waste because Freeze is in the final years of his career.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
He's up there in age. But the one home run, he just absolutely hammered that ball.
He cranked it, huh?
Yeah. Right. So, and I remember there a couple of World Series wins for the Cardinals, how big a role that Todd Freeze played in the Cardinals being able to win a World Series. So, with that in mind, if he's going to have a good year, then what happens? Because Mercer's had an outstanding spring.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean then? Because, do you bring Gung back and put him at short, which was his natural position in Korea?
Right. Uh-huh.
And then what do you do with Jordy? You can't take a guy that's playing that well and take him out. And then what do you do? Let's say you decide to move him to second, which I don't think they would.
No, you don't move Harrison out of there. I mean, you've got a pretty good, solid infield at this point, other than I don't know that much about the first baseman, and we'll just see how that works out. And you still have Rodriguez and some of those guys that can kind of fill in as utility wherever they're needed. But having said that, we wish the Buccos the best of luck as they enter into the 2016 campaign on Sunday against the Cardinals. Dave, you imagine you can get some tickets anytime next week when they play home, especially if the weather gets cold.
Opening day you won't be able
not
to.
On Sunday you're not, but I mean probably Monday through the week if they're at home. I just feel like it'll start snowing probably next week, because that's usually what happens when they come back. I'd rather be playing in Pittsburgh though than in Chicago because they're going to catch hell out there. If it's windy here, it's going to be cold and windy definitely in Chicago. So we'll see how Major League Baseball of course pans out this year. Meanwhile, Dave, it's Monday Night Sports Talk. Greg Banks in the studio. Dave Shannon live from Altoona. You can call us 814-242-4845. Let's talk about the big event, Dave, and that's the Penguins, of course, just winning all over the place, especially that big win with the Rangers yesterday. Now, I understand they're kind of like right behind the Rangers now, Dave, by a few points.
2 points,
2 points now. Okay, so how's that look for the Pens as they skate into maybe second place with only 7 games left? And they will have the home advantage, wouldn't they? And who are the superstars this week?
Yeah, one of the things that I actually may have misstated that. I think the Rangers have 95 and the Penguins 92.
Yeah, I have here 3 points at this point.
Yeah, 3-point difference. However, where the Penguins are right now, if they played the playoffs today, they would have home ice advantage in the first round, and we'd be playing the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay.
So that's the way it would start right now, the way it is now.
Yeah.
I think the Penguins, for one of the first times now in recent history, home ice has meant something to them. They have played extremely well in Pittsburgh. And so with that in mind, I for the first time, I think having the home ice is going to be a big deal for the Penguins, especially in the first round. And I'm getting to the point now that they moved up. And the other thing it's amazing about what they've just done here, Greg, they're doing this without Evgeny Malkin.
Right.
And to the point where, as a Penguins fan, I'm almost concerned about Malkin getting healthy and coming back, because he may screw up the chemistry that they have without him.
I was going to ask you about it. You think now without Malkin in there, the lines are pretty solid playing for Sullivan, and he has them kind of acclimated to playing with one another now? Or do you see a chemistry problem there down the road maybe?
Well, everybody's going to have to make an adjustment, because what they've done is Nick Bonino has been centering that line in Malkin's place.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a completely different guy in there. You're going to Hagelin and Kessel are going to stay together.
Okay.
And so that's not going to change. It's whoever the centerman is. And you can't, if Evgeny Malkin is healthy and able to play at his complete, at his full, at full speed,
right,
you don't want to keep him out of the lineup. He's just too dangerous. And you have to bring him in, and they'll have to make some adjustments, because he is a different kind of player than certainly than what Bonino is.
Oh, no doubt.
And so there'll be some adjustments there. But like I say, you don't like to mess with chemistry, but then again, you can't take one of the top players in the NHL and say, he's a healthy scratch tonight. No, you don't do a healthy scratch on Malkin.
Not on those guys, for sure. Hey, what do you attribute the latest scoring burst to? Seems like everybody's shooting the puck, man. And Crosby looked good yesterday. And you mentioned Hagelin. He's been having some great games as well.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was just watching the NHL Network does a weekly awarding of the 3 stars for the league for the week. And Phil Kessel actually was the number 3 star for this past week.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of people, I keep hearing people say this, and it's, I don't know. Maybe I've watched hockey for so long. I've admired Phil Kessel. I heard these people, the Pittsburgh pundits, were ready to get rid of Phil Kessel back in December.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's not doing it. He's not worth it. All I know is I see a guy that can, when he sees an opportunity, skates as fast as hell.
Yeah.
Can shoot the puck. And is such a valuable member of that team. For anybody to say, get rid of Phil Kessel, whoever you are, and you know who you are, you ought to tuck your head between your legs and just leave the room right now.
Oh, man, yeah.
Well, and so, but, what has gotten them into the scoring? First of all, I think to a degree this is the culmination of the Sullivan coaching experience. He's got them now. They believe in what they're doing. They were losing to the Red Wings after the first period on Saturday, and they come back to beat them 7-2.
No kidding.
And, and it just shows that the team has advanced to a new level. And to my surprise, I didn't know if they'd be able to make that jump. And I'll tell you what, the last 3 games they played against the Rangers, they're seriously playing these better teams at a level they need to advance in the playoffs. They played the Rangers well. The last 2 games they played against the Capitals, they played well against them. They're showing that ability to beat the upper level teams. And if you take that into the postseason, you might at least make it they could make it maybe as far as the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know where Washington will be. You never know what kind of injuries can happen. Same thing for the Penguins. You don't know who may get injured yet for them.
Hey, well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Penguins are now peaking at the right time here? They only have 7 games to go in the regular season. And I looked at the schedule earlier today, and, there are a few threats yet on this schedule, but, they should be able to fare well, I'm thinking.
Oh, absolutely. No, I see that. I just see them. I think it's a good momentum time. Yeah. I think they can carry that through. Fleury has seemed to be extremely good over the last while back, too. And, of course, that's such a big part of it. I mean, you need to have that, sometimes teams that just because they have a goalie that's that good in the Stanley Cup playoffs, that you will end up going way further than anyone thought you could simply because that goalie is playing, as it has been said, like they're unconscious and just saving everything that's shot at them.
Yeah.
And Fleury seems to be in that kind of a mode right now. I think they're peaking at a good time, and barring any injuries between now and the end of the season, I see them with no problem into the second round, and I see them maybe making it to the conference final.
Hey, I jumped into this NHL website. I want to get your comments on this. They're saying that Phil Kessel of the Penguins, many wondered if he would contribute in a big way during his first season in Pittsburgh, and even though it didn't look good for the majority of the season, he appears to have turned the corner of late. Also, Sid Crosby, no mistake, one of the best players in the world, is pretty close to his best when his team needs him most. Would you agree with that statement, Dave, that he is now rising to the occasion, first of all, with Sid Crosby? And are you surprised about Kessel in light of what's going on?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think Kessel was in a situation there where he was, first of all, he could not adjust to goofball system, so that's why he wasn't very good through December.
Yeah.
And then when they got a real coach in, Mike Sullivan started to implement things, and you could see it game by game because you don't come in as a new head coach, implement a new system, and everything just happens. It's not like instant offense or whatever, just add water and stir. Mm-hmm. And it took a while, but you could see game by game, you could see these
guys are developing chemistry. Yeah, as you mentioned before, and under the old regime, didn't seem like Johnson had any kind of chemistry because I think those lines were all out of whack. They were so inconsistent from time to time.
And I think that comes with the motivation that you get from your head coach. And I don't know what Mike Johnston did off the ice. I was never at a practice, so I don't know. Maybe the guy did seem like a good coach, but what mattered were the results that he got on the ice. I'll tell you one thing. I look, and this may be a silly thing, and people can bitch at me if they want to, but I was so sick and tired of watching Johnston staring at the damn scoreboard after every scoring play and just having his jaw, and he turned into a mouth breather when he was looking up at the scoreboard. And it's like, this guy, now every once in a while I see Sullivan look up on a questionable play. He'll look up because then he wants to know if he should be jumping on the officials.
Is there a red flag challenge in hockey that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, they do get one. They do get a replay challenge. Okay. And there's certain plays that are, open for discussions. And then, the NHL has some pretty good rules too on reviewing plays. One of the ones that has come up recently is when you have a two-man break going into the offensive zone. And sometimes it's so close because these guys are so fast, and there's a question as to whether one of them is offside. If so, you have to take the goal back. If they go in and score a goal and one of those guys was offside, you have to take the goal back.
Right.
And this has been one of the biggest challenges that I've seen come into play and actually change a decision that was made on the ice because, as I say, they're moving so quickly.
Right.
And even though you have that linesman right there on the blue line watching exactly what's happening, they're going at a speed sometimes that it is just difficult to say, I didn't call it when it happened. Maybe the guy was offside. So those are generally the replay challenges that you see a lot of the coaches making. Is whether that player was offside or not.
Anyhow, Phil Kessel getting a lot of love from the NHL this week and apparently turning the corner. He's gotten 7 points in the past 2 games with 2 goals and 5 assists. Then just briefly about Sidney Crosby. Yesterday, of course, winning in overtime with that score as they beat the Rangers 3-2. Some of the stats there, Dave, he has at least 1 point in 14 of his past 15 games. He has 7 goals and 15 assists also in that span. Overall, he has 32 goals and 46 assists. You think MVP this year, or who would you select in the NHL for MVP if not Sid?
Well, you have to look at Patrick Kane with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think Kane, and then Ovechkin has to be in the conversation as well.
Yeah,
because Ovechkin's such an important part of the Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
So there are other guys out there that are certainly worthy of consideration, and the fact that Sid had a half a season, although Sid has accomplished in a half a season what most guys do over 2.
No doubt, no doubt.
So it just goes to show what his ability is.
Well, conversely, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's just a shame that Mike Johnston was never able to implement Sidney Crosby in a way that made him the valuable contributor that he is now. He just didn't. I don't think Sid was interested in playing for Johnston.
Right.
And with that in mind, that's why he had a tough go of it. And now he's bought into what Mike Sullivan's doing. And there are times when you skate over to the bench, and I just wouldn't even look at the man. He just looks like he could rip your head off.
Hey, meanwhile, it looks like Hornquist has been having a little struggle in the last 7 games. He hasn't had a goal. Have you seen any kind of problem with him in the last few games?
What's going on there, Greg, is everybody, is looking at videotape all the time.
Yeah.
And Patrick Hornquist's success is standing in front of the goalie, blocking his view.
Right.
And when you're in that area and you get your stick into the right area when a puck is shot, you're going to get a deflection goal.
Okay.
And I think a lot of teams are saying we're not going to let Patrick Hornquist beat us at the front of the net, and they're trying to keep him out of there.
Right.
And they're being a little more successful with it. And I'm sure Patrick will figure out what to do, and the coaching staff will figure out what to do. If you want to put that much of an effort on Patrick Hornquist, that leaves Sidney Crosby and Chris Kunitz open to do a whole lot of stuff.
Hey, let me check this out. They playing again, tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, yeah.
All right. Hey, well, best of luck to the Penguins as they skate towards the Stanley Cup. At least we can be hopeful, Dave, and we'll talk about it, I guess, next week. Hey, let me ask you this real quick as we wrap things up on Monday Night Sports Talk. Dale Earnhardt Jr. announcing today that he'll donate his brain for research. With this, he becomes, I think, the second professional person we've heard from in the last couple of weeks wanting to donate their brain. What do you think about that idea?
Well, and I think it's a big thing that's been going on, and I think this concussion stuff that's been happening in sports for a lot of years is finally being paid attention to in a way it always should have been.
Right.
And I think it's a good thing, and hats off to those people for doing that, because if it leads to making sure that someone can still play a particular sport and not be worried about the rest of their life really being somewhat less than what it could have been, I'm all for it.
And all for the benefit
hats off.
Yeah, medical service and medical science, of course. And I could leave a couple of parts, too, but they'd say, we don't want that.
Yeah, what do we want that guy's parts for?
Thank you, Dave Shannon, for being on Monday Night Sports Talk. Hey, man, we made it through another night. I appreciate it, dude.
Good to be here.
All right, glad to have you, man. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll be back again next Monday night from 7 to 8 to do it again, live here on the airnetwork.net. Stick around because we've got, of course, rebroadcast of this show coming up throughout the evening and throughout the week. Have a great one. So long.